Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to completely deconstruct something you probably think you already understand perfectly. We are breaking down a really profound philosophical text by the author Xu Feng. And to do this properly, we kind of have to unlearn all of our preconceived notions about human connection. The text we're examining, which is titled Those Who Do Not Understand Love Cannot Feel the Love of Others, posits that love is the absolute most brilliant, pure, and soul-stirring thing in the entire universe. But, as we'll see in a minute, actually achieving it requires a massive, massive shift in perspective. So let's dive right into a pretty provocative question. When you say I love you, do you actually just mean I like you? Because according to our source material, the vast majority of people completely misunderstand and frankly misuse the word love on a daily basis. I mean, think about how often we just throw that phrase around, right? We say it casually, we say it out of habit, we say it when someone brings us our favorite coffee. But the text argues that what we're actually experiencing in those everyday moments isn't love at all. It's simply liking. And confusing those two things, that's the root of a lot of massive emotional confusion.
All right, let's get into section 1, the illusion of love. Let's start by totally dismantling the very foundation of what we think human connection actually is. Notice how conditional liking really is. It totally depends on how someone makes you feel, what they do for you, or how they conveniently fit into your life. The text makes a really stark comparison here, pointing out that true loving is incredibly rare specifically because it strips away all of those conditions entirely.
So here's the crucial point, pulled straight from the text. Love is a selfless devotion without any conditions. Read that again, without any conditions. It's this deep, intuitive understanding that's honestly kind of hard to capture in words, but if we have to define it, it's this absolute selfless giving. If your feelings for someone are contingent on them acting a certain way or providing you with some specific benefit, the text firmly argues that you are just in the realm of liking. You're not loving.
Moving right along to section 2, love is not sacrifice.
We really need to debunk a massive, widely accepted myth about romantic relationships here, and that's the whole martyr complex. We see this everywhere in pop culture, don't we? The idea that true love requires this agonizing, painful sacrifice. But the author argues that if you feel like you are sacrificing something for another person, you are gravely mistaken. In fact, you're actually insulting and desecrating the sacredness of love. According to the source text, true love does not involve sacrifice at all. It is only filled with profound joy and bliss. If giving to the other person feels like a painful loss to you, then the connection you share just hasn't reached that pure, pristine state of true love yet.
Which brings us nicely to section 3, weeds of the heart.
So why do so many people completely fail to grasp this joy? Well, it's because their internal soul garden is completely overgrown with some very specific toxic traits. We're talking about jealousy, comparisons, resentment, anger, selfishness, arrogance, possessiveness, controlling tendencies, and greed. The text uses this vivid metaphor of a soul garden. And honestly, if your garden is choked with these weeds, they will completely smother your ability to ever taste or even understand the essence of true love. You literally just do not have the internal environment required for something so pure to take root. Leaving this garden untended basically guarantees that you're going to remain blind to genuine devotion.
Okay, let's jump into section 4, the essence of devotion.
Now, brace yourself a bit, because the author uses a really intense, powerful metaphor here to make a point. The text says, it's like the object of your love plunging a knife into your heart, and you find it so wonderful, so comforting, that you say, "Oh God, thank you for this greatest blessing." This shocking imagery is used to illustrate a love with such absolute trust and surrender that whatever the beloved does is seen as a profound blessing. The knife imagery is meant to be jarring. It forces us to completely strip away our self-preservation and our ego. When you love with absolute selflessness, you trust that person so completely that even an act that seems harmful on the surface is received as a divine gift simply because it comes from them.
Now, hearing that metaphor, you're probably wondering, wait a minute, does this just sound like a case of sadism and masochism? The author actually anticipates that exact question and answers it with a resounding no, absolute not. This is not about physical pain or abuse at all. It's a metaphor for a deeply personal, spiritual comprehension. Because that metaphorical knife is wielded by the specific object of your profound love and literally no one else, it completely transcends logic. It's a sacred understanding that is experienced and comprehended only by the two individuals involved.
And because of this sheer, extreme intensity, the text gives us a pretty stark warning. Love should never, ever be spoken lightly or casually. When you declare love in this truest sense, it instantly becomes a sacred promise. And if that promise isn't upheld with the complete selfless devotion we've been talking about, it stops being joyful. Instead, it transforms into a really heavy emotional burden and a deeply spiritual debt. This is exactly why we have to be so careful with our words.
And that leads us into our final section, Section 5. Who can understand love?
So, what actually happens when you try to offer this profound, selfless devotion to someone whose soul garden is still just full of weeds? The author provides this fantastic analogy about mismatched diets to show just how futile mismatched love is. Think about it. You wouldn't feed meat to cows, sheep, or horses, right? And you wouldn't feed grass to lions, tigers, or leopards. And you certainly wouldn't offer anything but soil to an earthworm. Offering the rich meat of true devotion to a spiritual herbivore, meaning someone who only understands the shallow brass of conditional liking, is just never going to work. The text is super clear. Speaking of love to someone who doesn't understand it is completely futile. It's literally like trying to discuss complex emotions with a cow. They simply cannot process what you're trying to feed them.
Therefore, the logical step when your profound love is inevitably misunderstood or rejected isn't to lash out. First, do not be angry. Second, recognize that they just have to go through their own process of perfection. You simply cannot force someone to understand a concept their soul isn't ready for. They need more time to identify and pull out those weeds of jealousy, arrogance, and selfishness from their own internal garden before they can ever even hope to receive what you're trying to give.
So why do we do all this work? What's the point? Well, the text concludes with this incredibly soaring philosophical payoff. The fewer weeds you have in your soul garden, the more you can actually understand love. And because love is the most sacred thing in the universe, embodying it aligns you directly with the greatest creator, who, the text asserts, is love himself. The more love your life embodies, the more you resemble the creator, which ultimately sublimates you into what the author calls a super-celestial being. It is the ultimate elevation of your entire state of existence.
I want to leave you with this final, really provocative thought to reflect on today. Are you nurturing a soul garden that can finally understand true love? Or are you letting weeds choke out your potential for profound joy, all while continuing to mistake conditional liking for the most powerful force in the universe? Take a really hard look at your own garden, clear out the weeds, and perhaps you'll finally be ready to experience that true, selfless devotion. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.